Today, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry hints at the possible deployment of a U.S. missile defense system to South Korea, but officials from both sides say no formal talks were held during his stop in Seoul. Korea and India agree to upgrade their relations to a special strategic partnership. The two sides will also launch talks to improve their free trade agreement by next year. First, an appeals court in the United States chops more than $380 million off the amount of damages Samsung has to pay Apple in their smartphone patent war. Stay tuned for these stories and more.
Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Tuesday, May 19th here in Seoul. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. We start with the high-profile visit to South Korea by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. The top U.S. diplomat had some strong words for North Korea during his stay in Seoul on Monday. Kerry warned that Pyongyang's military provocations and rampant human rights abuses only serve to further isolate the country. Hwang Sang-hee starts us off.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry slammed North Korea on Monday for its latest military provocations and human rights abuses. In a press conference following talks with South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se in Seoul, Kerry warned of stronger sanctions against Pyongyang for its recent test of a submarine-launched ballistic missile.
We are indeed talking about ways to increase the pressure and increase the potential of either sanctions or other means of making it clear to him that he is on a very dangerous course in the missile systems and continued pursuit of his nuclear weapons program.
Calling the latest high-level executions as one of the most flagrant examples of the country's reckless disregard for human rights, Kerry said the North Korean leader could ultimately be punished for the abuses.
And if their horrific conduct continues, it is hard to see how that referral to the criminal court would not take place. Their behavior is against all notions of conscience, all standards of behavior, anywhere in the world.
Despite the strong words, Kerry said Washington is seeking a peaceful resolution for the Korean peninsula, not further conflict, saying this will only be possible when Pyongyang is ready to deal with its nuclear program. Until then, he said Seoul and Washington will work together under an alliance that is stronger than ever.
Let me underscore, there is no daylight, not an inch, not a centimeter, not a microscope of difference between the United States and the Republic of Korea in our approach to the question of North Korea's provocations and its nuclear program.
Secretary Kerry also expressed the hope that successful nuclear talks with Iran next month will serve as a positive example of a more legitimate path to the global community for North Korea. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
And staying with the U.S. Secretary of State's brief stop in Seoul, and South Korea and the United States have stressed that no official consultations took place on the possible deployment to Korea of a controversial U.S. missile defense system during Kerry's visit. Now, these statements were released after Kerry publicly mentioned Washington's motive to deploy the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, otherwise known as THAAD, to better deal with North Korea's escalating threats. Now, Kerry made the case during a speech to American soldiers stationed here on Monday. Officials at Seoul's foreign ministry said Kerry's statements were just meant to stress the seriousness of North Korea's nuclear and missile provocations and reiterated that no formal negotiations were held on this matter. The US Embassy in Seoul also echoed that stance, saying Kerry's words were merely aimed at American soldiers present at the meeting. North Korean leader Kim Jongun has reportedly ordered a new aerospace center to test launch a rocket carrying a satellite in October. This is when the country marks the 70th anniversary of the founding of its ruling party. Tokyo-based Kyodo News reported Monday that Kim directly instructed the National Aerospace Development Administration earlier this year to implement the project. The international community, including South Korea, the US and Japan, believe this to be part of North Korea's efforts to develop an intercontinental ballistic missile. Now, earlier this month, the North's official Korean Central News Agency reported that Kim visited the newly built Satellite Control and Command Center, telling officials there that his country will continue developing space technology despite international sanctions. The United States has reiterated its call for Korea and Japan to resolve their differences for the sake of peace and stability in the region. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry made clear on Monday that the Japanese military was behind Tokyo's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women.
With respect to the powerful and important part of reconciliation that comes from the events of World War II, particularly the trafficking of women for sexual purposes by the Japanese military during that war, we have said many times that that was a terrible, egregious violation of human rights.
This marks the first time for Washington's top diplomat to point finger at the Japanese military for the trafficking of the so-called comfort women. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe defines the women as victims of human trafficking, but has refrained from acknowledging the military's role. Kerry also emphasized both countries need to resolve issues over their shared history, moving forward in order to promote peace and prosperity in East Asia. Following Kerry's remarks, Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se reiterated Seoul's relationship with Washington remains unhindered despite tensions with Tokyo. According to the minister, Seoul is ready to improve diplomatic ties, but added Tokyo needs to take appropriate first steps.
Abe's address in Washington last month fell short of an apology, failing to enhance relations between the two countries. But Japan has a few more opportunities to live up to its historic wrongdoings to better Seoul-Tokyo ties.
In recent months, Korea has expressed concern over the U.S. and Japan beefing up their alliance, revising defense guidelines to expand the role of Japan's self-defense forces abroad. But Kerry says that nothing can be done by Japan without Seoul's prior consent, in terms of dispatching its forces on the Korean peninsula. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Korea and India have agreed to elevate their bilateral relations to a special strategic partnership. President Park Geun-hye and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi reached a deal on Monday during summit talks in Seoul. Our Chae Sun reports.
In materializing their special strategic partnership, President Park Geun-hye and Prime Minister Narendra Modi agreed on 11 ways to expand cooperation. It includes holding a summit each year and regular meetings on diplomacy, security, and defense. Prime Minister Modi backed President Park's trust-building and unification policies with North Korea and her peace and co-prosperity initiatives in Northeast Asia and Eurasia. In an effort to further spur two-way trade, which totaled $18 billion last year, the two leaders agreed to start negotiations on a revision to their trade pact by the first half of next year. Under the current trade deal, only 85% of traded goods are subject to tariff concessions, compared to 90% in India's trade pact with Japan. Seoul also agreed to prepare $10 billion in support for Korean firms that participate in India's infrastructure projects, along with deals signed to bolster cooperation in the areas of renewable energy, shipping, and distribution. With President Park welcoming the Indian leader's Make in India initiative to foster his country's manufacturing sector, the two sides will look into Korean shipbuilders taking part in New Delhi's $1.8 billion project to construct 9 units of LNG carriers. Prime Minister Modi plans to further promote his Make in India campaign in meetings with Korean business leaders on Tuesday. Also on his itinerary is a trip down to the southeastern city of Ulsan, home to Hyundai Heavy Industries, the world's largest shipyard. There he hopes to appeal to Korean shipbuilders to invest more in his country. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon arrived in Seoul on Monday for a 5-day visit, his first trip back to his homeland in nearly 2 years. The focus of his trip is the World Education Forum in Songdo, west of Seoul. That runs from today, Tuesday, to Friday. On Tuesday, Ban is scheduled to give an opening speech at the forum, and he will hold a press conference with the UNESCO Director General Irina Bokova. The next day, Wednesday, he is scheduled to have meetings with President Park Geun-hye and Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se. On the agenda for both meetings are Korea-UN relations, climate change and Korean Peninsula security. Turning now to the latest twist in the smartphone patent war, an appeals court in the United States has overturned parts of a 2012 jury verdict against Samsung that entitled Apple to $930 million in damages. The Washington-based Federal Circuit on Monday upheld a prior patent infringement verdict, but threw out a trademark finding that the iPhone's appearance could be protected, saying it would have given Apple a perpetual monopoly over making smartphones work better. Now, this ruling means the California court that came to the original verdict will have to reconsider $382 million of that massive fine. The appeals court says Samsung should still pay damages for patent infringement violations, including one that protects the shape and color of the iPhone. Now, watchers say Apple will be happier with this ruling than Samsung, given that it upholds the bulk of its damages award and reinforces the principle of coming up with an original design. Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba Group has opened up Tmall in Korea, a shopping platform that sells Korean products. Alibaba founder Jack Ma and Korea's finance minister Choi Kyung-hwan attended the launching of the site in Seoul on Monday. The business-to-consumer shopping platform aims to put Korean agricultural and manufactured goods, as well as tourism-related products, in the reach of hundreds of millions of Chinese consumers. The Korea International Trade Association says the new platform will greatly help small and mid-sized Korean businesses that want to sell their products in the global marketplace. Now, Alibaba will also provide internship opportunities for Korean graduates from July, helping them get a better understanding of Chinese consumers and Korea's e-commerce market. The European Union has approved a Mediterranean naval mission to tackle the growing migrant crisis in that region. Officials say the first phase will be an intelligence-gathering operation, but in latter phases, vessels suspected of harbouring migrants could be boarded, seized and even disposed of in Libyan territory or international waters. This as long as the use of force is approved under a UN resolution. The EU's foreign policy chief, Federica Mogherini, says the first phase could start in just over 1 month's time. The operation will have its headquarters in Rome and have an initial year-long mandate. Now, this comes as over 1,800 migrants fleeing war and famine in Africa have died so far this year trying to reach Europe via the Mediterranean. Now, Koreans swell with pride when they think about the country's easternmost Dokdo Island, and thousands make the trip across the choppy East Sea waters every year to see the place with their own eyes. But a group of people stay there on and off all year round, protecting the far-flung piece of Korea's land, and that is a job that is particularly important given Japan's continued claims over Dokdo. Our Connie Kim has this report.
They are the guardians of Korea's easternmost island of Dokdo. They have the immense responsibility of protecting the 2 rocky outcroppings in the East Sea located between the Korean peninsula and Japan, and they're there to greet every visitor who makes a trip.
What's most memorable is when visitors hold our hands tightly and thank us for protecting Tokdo. They wave their Korean flags and shout, "This is Tokdo," as soon as they get off their ferry.
Japan claimed the islets in 1905, just before it annexed Korea. But Korea reclaimed sovereignty over all of its territories around the peninsula, including Tokdo. All the more reason for the Ulung guards to be on standby 24/7. And as one of Korea's recent efforts to defend the island, the Korean military and maritime police carried out a defense drill last week. Experts say Japan's continued claims over Tokdo will continue, so it's crucial for Korea to reach out to people and organizations in Japan to prove once and for all that Tokdo is Korean territory, whichever way you look at it. Japan repeated its claim to Tokdo in this year's diplomatic blue book, and currently 13 textbooks say Tokdo is illegally occupied by Korea.
More evidence showing Tokdo as Korean territory continues to be discovered in Japan, disproving Tokyo's claims. Those works need to be translated into English to promote the findings.
This map from Japan's Commerce Ministry dating back to 1897, and these from another map compiled in 1948 are examples of how the Japanese government identifies both Tokdo and the neighboring Ulung-do Island as Korean territory. But with Tokyo denying even its own historic data, Korea will continue to protect and defend the islands. Connie Kim, Arirang News, Ulung.
Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out our website, arirang.co.kr/news, and do download our smartphone application. We do hope to see you at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.